What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a quick little update and follow-up on our off-brand tire machine and balancer. These are called Mayflower. It's a Mayflower tire machine, Mayflower balancer. I bought these off their website, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. Ever since I got them, from the beginning, from day one, I've gotten a decent amount of hate from friends and in the comments saying, yo, those machines aren't going to last you. But I'm here to tell you, we're going to be mounting 37s today. Just to be clear, I'm not hating on the other machines. There are some really nice machines out there, but I wasn't planning to throw $6,000 plus towards a tire machine. I'm by no means a tire expert or tire tech. I don't do this stuff every day. This is a hobby shop. I found it necessary that we had our own tire machine and balancer due to the work/side hobbies that we do. My brother and I, we like to buy and fix cars, and we have our own off-road projects and whatnot. It just made sense to buy our own setup. Right away, since we bought the machines, I want to say I've made my money back almost instantly. Just from the amount of money we've saved from having to visit tire shops and from the amount of side work that I've gotten from friends and family. Just with those two methods, I'd say it was worth it to us. One of the biggest advantages of having your own setup is that you can do your own wheels and tires whenever you want. I've proven that we can do low pros. I've done drag packs. I've actually done the drag pack on my own car. I've done a drag pack on a 1,000 horsepower Hellcat. I've done drag packs on Supras. Low pro tires, I even did a low pro tire on this drift car BMW where it had a stretched tire. I've done 35s, plenty of 35s, and today I'm gonna show you guys how we do 37s. I'm running this current setup on my L5P Duramax. This is a 37 by 12.5, and I'm running it on a 20 by 9 tire. The issue is that per specifications, this tire does not work on this wheel because it is a 9-inch wheel, and that tire calls for a minimum of a 10-inch wheel. On Marketplace, I recently found these. I'm actually really digging the setup of these Hostile wheels. These are Hostile Cyclones. It is a 20 by 10 with a negative 19 millimeter offset. I didn't want too crazy of an offset. Previously on the truck, I had a 22 by 12 with a negative 44 offset, and it was just overkill. 10-inch wide wheel, it will meet specs of that tire, and I've got a little bit of a dish here going. What is that? So the first thing we want to do is get the air out, and to do that, get yourself a nice little valve core removal tool, and I'll go ahead and insert these links in the description down below. Should you be interested in buying your own tire machine balancer and all the miscellaneous tools that you'll need. Come on, let's get the little valve core out. Now that all the air is out, we're going to go ahead and break the bead on this before we get it on the tire machine. If you have a TPMS sensor in your wheel, and if you don't know if you have a TPMS sensor, it's best to just avoid the area of where the tire valve is, because we don't want to pry off that TPMS sensor when we're prying off the bead over here. So this bead will come off fairly easily because we recently installed these wheels and tires. So it's not as sticky as it would be on a car that's had tires on the wheel for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Again, we're avoiding the area of the tire valve. And then we'll get the back side. So real quick before we get the wheel onto the tire machine, we want to check if it's front mounted or reverse mounted. And to check that, looking for this drop right here. Is this drop closest to this edge or that edge? In our case, this drop is closest to this edge. This edge has to be facing up. And in our case, it's a reverse mounted wheel. For the wheel that's getting the 37 taken off of it, we're gonna look for that drop. And in this case, it's closest to the front. So this is a front mounted wheel. Look at the tire machine. We've got these jaws, and this is what holds the wheel to the tire machine. There's two ways of holding the wheel to the tire machine. We've got the inside jaws, and what that does is it grabs the wheel on the outside of the wheel. And then we've got the outside jaws, and what this does is it expands out and grabs the inside of the wheel. If possible, try to use the inside jaws to prevent damage to your wheel. If you have a wheel that's too wide and we can't wrap around it using the inside jaws, then you kind of have no option but to use the outside jaws. However, there is a likelihood that you're going to damage your wheel because these things are just going to dig right into the paint. And you can see right here, this was done out of pure laziness. Whoever had these wheels before me, they took it to a tire shop, unless they did it themselves, and the tire shop just mounted them using the outside jaws. It is harder getting them into the inside jaws, but you know, when you're paying a lot of money for nice wheels, you would expect that somebody will take care of them the way you would want them to. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the jaws. And then we're gonna get our wheel here. Using proper body mechanics, we'll get the wheel onto the tire machine. And then we'll close the jaws and just let the jaws kind of close in on the wheel. There we go. One thing I like to do to give us less friction over here when we're trying to pry the tire off is get yourself a soapy solution. This is just dish soap with some water. Pump that up, and then we'll just get it all around. Now we'll go ahead and grab our duck bill, release this lever, and then we get it on the edge of the rim, lock that in place, and then there's a safety mechanism over here that just prevents this from flying in towards you should anything get caught up. So that's just a blocker. What we're going to do is position the valve right before the duck bill. When you're prying on one side, you want to give yourself some slack on the other side. Remember that drop in the wheel? What we're going to do is, as we pry up on this side, we're going to push this side down into that drop so that we have more space on this side to pry up that sidewall. So with tires that have a lot more sidewall, it'll be easier than tires that have no sidewall, or like performance tires where it's really stiff sidewalls. You're going to ride the struggle bus. In our case, I can just push this down with my hand. In those cases, you're going to need to have a second pry bar, or if you have a helper, they can come in with a pry bar and hold it down. Or if you have a fancy tire machine, it usually has a helper arm that pushes down for you. Now they do make clamps that you can kind of clamp into place. I've tried a few. I personally don't like them. I've done fine just doing it this way, or the two pry bar method. We're going with this edge and just grab onto the, grab onto the tire. There, and as we pry over, we'll push this down into that drop like butter, and then we'll turn it clockwise. The valve, we had it right before the duck bill. Whenever we're taking this off, just to protect ourselves from damaging the valve or the TPMS sensor, we have that right before the duck bill so that when we pry it up, let's say this valve was on this side and we pried that side down to give ourselves slack on this side. What happens is that side will go down, and in some cases it'll push onto that TPMS sensor and it could break it, right? So that's why when we're taking a tire off, that's right before the duck bill. So this part is going to be difficult to get the other sidewall. You're going to need a good amount of strength, or if you have a second helper, to help bring the whole tire up so that we can get that second sidewall into that drop as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the whole tire up, and I'm using my whole body over here to kind of hold it times. Latch onto that second sidewall with my pry bar and pull up. All right, there we go. So what we were doing was getting the second sidewall into that drop so that we could pretty much do the same thing as we did with this sidewall. And then clockwise again. So I just proved that we can dismount a 37-inch tire. planning to reuse the TPMS sensor, so I'm going to try to recover these. To get this off, I'm going to go ahead and remove the actual TPMS sensor from the valve itself, and that requires a T10 in my case. We'll unscrew the sensor, pull that off, and we'll set this aside. The reason we took the sensor off is because we're going to be pulling this whole assembly out the front, and we didn't want to damage the sensor. To get the tire valve out, whether you're replacing it or in my case, we're swapping it out to put it on the other wheel, get yourself a tool like that, or you can use something like this. That just screws onto the tire valve. Same thing with this one. And then you can use it to pull it out. But I like using this one. What we'll do is we'll screw it onto the tire valve, or the Schrader valve. I'm going to try to get as many threads as possible, because I've had cases where I threaded it only halfway and the threads itself broke when I tried to pry it out. As we pry this out, we don't want to damage the wheel, so I've got myself a rag here. I'm going to fold it several times. Get that right there. I've got 2 pry bars. We're going to hook on to both sides of that bar right there, and we're just going to pull this out. And there's our Schrader valve. Double check, make sure it didn't get cut or damaged or anything. Looks like we can reuse this one on our new wheel. Since I'm planning to list these up for sale and I have a tire that'll go on it, I'll show you guys how I mount a 35 onto it, as well as get a Schrader valve on it that doesn't have a TPMS sensor. Let's grab some of that soapy solution. Gonna spray the hole here for the Schrader valve. Spray the Schrader valve itself, just give ourselves some more lubrication. And then I'll use this tool this time. Feed that through. Screw on the tool. Okay. Don't ever pry on the wheel itself because you'll scratch it. Grab yourself a rag and we'll just pull up. And it'll just kind of pop into place. Unscrew that off and we're ready for the tire. Here's our brand used tire that's going to go onto my old setup. These are the tires that came with the new wheels. I've got myself some tire lube here. Just get a good amount of lubricant on the edge right here. We don't want to damage the wheel or tire. Early on when I first started doing this stuff, I remember I was helping my brother mount a set of winter tires on his Focus ST, and I shredded 2 brand new winter tires. And if you know a thing or two about tires, winter tires are not cheap. I literally shredded the edge right here, and he was not a happy camper. So that's why I'm making these videos, to prevent you from doing the same thing I did. We can give this a quick wipe. This wheel is brand new, so it's pretty clean. You can wipe around the edges over here. I've seen cases where dirt, mud, debris has gone on the edges, and if you don't clean it, you can end up with slow leaks on your tires. When you're mounting a tire, you always want to check if it's directional. Some tires only rotate in a certain direction. And you have to make sure based on which side you're mounting it on the car that it's going to be rotating in that direction. Or for like off-road tires, what they do is they'll have colored lettering if you want that on one side versus the other. Or with off-road tires as well, they have the raised lettering versus flat lettering. Looks like it has flat lettering on this side, raised lettering on this side. And you want raised lettering out. Because this doesn't have a TPMS sensor on it, you can just go ahead and start spinning this thing on without worrying about damaging a TPMS sensor. For demonstration reasons, I'm going to treat this as if there's a sensor right there. You always want the sensor to go in last when mounting it. When mounting the tire, I like to get the Schrader valve or TPMS sensor in the 7 to 9 o'clock area. And then get this tire on here, we'll get the duckbill back on the rim. And then just kind of like lightly support it as we go around. So the last thing to hit was the Schrader valve. The next step, since we've got the back sidewall mounted around the back of the wheel, we're going to go ahead and get the front sidewall mounted around the front of the wheel. Then we're going to treat this tire valve as if we have a tire pressure sensor on it. Want to keep this in the 7 to 9 o'clock area. A pry bar. And what we want to do is start this sidewall underneath that duckbill. And what this duck bill does is as we rotate the wheel, it'll start feeding that sidewall into the rim. Because this is a bigger tire, it's got a bigger sidewall, we won't need to use a pry bar to feed the sidewall into that drop in the wheel to give ourselves some slack. We can just go ahead and push down on it with our hands. We'll rotate and push down around this area. Once this point reaches around here, it'll get very tight. When it's crucial for you to get this side of the tire into that drop so we can give it some slack so that you're not tearing up the sidewall. We'll see if I can do this slow. See how it's real tight over here? And you can see that it's already pulling that sidewall into that drop because I fed it into that drop. And it should just pop right on. Get rid of that. At this point, you're probably thinking, okay, let's go ahead and fill this thing up with air. Don't do that because remember, we're hooked up onto this wheel with the jaws on the outside. You hook this up to air and you start filling it up with air. That sidewall will seat into its place. It'll grab onto those jaws and it'll be a struggle sometimes to try to get the jaws or sidewall freed up. Release the jaws. All right, and then we can either just set it on the outside jaws, or you could bring the jaws back in and then set it back on here, or you could just take this whole wheel and tire down. We can go ahead and get our Schrader valve put back in there, and then we've got our Schrader valve tool. Looks like this already has one installed in it, so I'm just gonna make sure it's tight, and then just start filling this up with air. And then you want to keep your fingers clear of the rim and the bead, because as it fills up, it'll seat into place, and you don't want your fingers there when it starts popping into place. Probably be a good idea to have safety glasses here too. But one trick you can do if you have a sidewall that's being really stubborn and doesn't want to seat. In our case, I could fill this up a little bit more. Right now we're only at 10 PSI, but for demonstration reasons, for example, I did some performance tires on a Hellcat, and the sidewall just did not want to pop up. What you can do, add a whole bunch of lubricant to it before you get the tire on the wheel. You can even put some lubricant on the wheel itself. Another trick is, as you're filling it up, you can just go ahead and tap on it with, I don't know, just a pry bar. As you're filling it up. And voila. Here we have our new to me wheel. And what I want to do is get rid of this tire valve so that I can put my tire valve with the tire pressure sensor. And then same trick. Go ahead, thread this on. Some sort of protective barrier. And then we'll just pry it up. It partially broke. Some of the rubber is still stuck inside of the rim. No worries. We got the hard part out. And we can just push out the rest of the rubber with a screwdriver or something. Just careful, try not to damage the wheel. Just like that. Because there's some debris in there, just gonna spray with some of that soapy solution. Make sure it's clean. Remember, you want to try to get all the threads if possible. Protective barrier. And just pull it up until it seats in its place. All right, cool. Tire pressure sensor mounted back on here. Usually it's keyed to where there's a flat side and a curved side. So you want to make sure it goes in the right way into the pocket. One thing you could do is just feed the sensor on first, and then you can go ahead and screw it on. And I'm just going hand tight. There we go. Nothing crazy for these. So let's not forget, with these new wheels, they're reverse mounted, so we need to flip this around. So again, we're back with our tire lubricant. And get some around both sidewalls. One thing to note, on newer tires, you'll notice these dots right here. And what these dots indicate are low and heavy points in the tire. If you have a yellow dot, you mount this yellow dot closest to the tire valve. And if you have a red dot takes precedence over the yellow dot from what I've researched so far. So in our case, we're gonna mount this tire with the red dot closest to the tire valve on our wheel. Get this tire on the rim. That, get the duckbill in position. All right. And then because the tire valve is kind of in the middle of the wheel, like if this is back of the wheel, front of the wheel, tire valve is kind of in the middle. So you want to be careful because as the sidewall drops, you don't want it to drop and hit the tire pressure sensor. So what I'm going to do is locate the tire pressure sensor. And again, place it in the 7 to 9 o'clock so that it's the last impact point. And I'm going to get this sidewall on. What I'm going to do is as it drops, I'm going to hold it right around that tire sensor so that it doesn't drop on it. There you go. Caught it. Slowly feed it around the sensor. Make sure we're clear. Now we can start with this sidewall. So because the tire valve is so far down in the wheel, you don't really have to worry about hitting it with this sidewall. I'm still gonna treat it as if it's at the impact point for educational reasons, and you kind of want to make a good habit out of it. The other thing we can't forget is the dot on the tire. We want to line that up with the tire valve as best as possible. Locate the red dot and just leave my finger on it and kind of rotate this tire until we line up with the tire valve. One other thing you could do is just when you apply lubricant to this, just apply a whole bunch so that even though we get this mounted, if we don't line up the tire with the wheel, we can still try to rotate the wheel within the tire before we fill it up with air. Again, over the duckbill. I guess for this one, I could show you how we do it with the pry bar. I'm gonna treat this as if it's a low pro tire. What you want to do is get around the 6 o'clock area and then start rotating. And then as you rotate this, you'll notice that this gap gets smaller and smaller, and the tighter it gets, you won't have to pry in as much because it'll just kind of like feed itself in, and I'll show you guys. So you notice how it's getting tighter? That gap is closed, and now the tire is just like stuck into that drop. Voila. Now we can get this off. So before I fill it up with air, I want to make sure that our red dot lines up with the tire valve. And then for demonstration reasons, I can show you guys that I could still kind of spin this within the tire because of the amount of lubricant we applied. We get that lined up, and now we can fill it up there. One habit you want to make whenever you're working on a tire or wheel around the tire machine when the actual deck isn't being used is if the jaws are sticking out, you always want to get them back in, because if you look over here, we've got hose fittings right on the outside of these jaws, and I've broken a couple to where anytime the jaws are open, if I'm done with the tire machine, get them back in the closed position, because what will happen, let's say I left that open and I was bringing this tire over to fill it up with air, I would have hit that fitting and broken it. So there's a reason why I have extra fittings on hand. I forgot to put a Schrader valve inside of it, one of these little guys. And this is the tool can see, just goes around it like that. And then what you want to do is you want to hold onto it like this, because the minute you take this nozzle off, high pressured air is coming out, and I've had times where it'll blow it out of my hand. So you just kind of hold onto the whole assembly together, feed it in, and just twist it into its threads. Get it hand tight, nothing crazy, and we're good. And if you need to top off the air, put this back on and top off the air. All right, guys, so that's pretty much a wrap. Just wanted to show you guys a quick update / follow-up on these machines. We just mounted 37s on our Mayflower tire machine. I think it's fair to say that this machine has done fine for me, and I'm pretty sure it would do fine for you. I'm gonna go ahead and get this set up balanced now. I'm not gonna make a video on it because I already have one. I'll go ahead and link it in the description down below. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead, drop them down below. I'll do my best to get to them. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media platforms at MJLTerry. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to do more of this kind of content. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.